what I was saying earlier about being like a game dev YouTuber or YouTuber game dev, and it's annoying because if you want to design a game for a video, you can't really do it in a typical way, because your typical game design is to make everything look really bad at first, right? And then in like the last sort of like fifth of development is when you're improving the visuals and making everything like finalized and polishing. Well, if you do that in a video, that means 80% of your video is just looking at dull stuff that no one cares about, right? And considering no one's actually playing the game, you could have designed like the world's best player controller, but in the video no one cares because they're not actually playing, they don't feel that. So it's very much about making the game look good throughout. And so you kind of have to design games in a weird way where you have this like vertical slice that you're just making bigger and bigger and bigger as the video goes on, rather than building it up in layers. And you mentioned Jonas. Jonas is actually kind of like special in his channel because, as you say, he's working on an actual game, but he's also making content in a way that appeals to the other side of it that I've spoken about. So it's like he's kind of like an all-round, like an all-star kind of thing.
All right, welcome Jack to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, no worries. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so for me, this is a really exciting time because I haven't really dived into the realm of YouTube content creator, solo devs, and I've seen people around like Jonas Tyrola. I've gone to like watch tutorials and like found people's pages. There's someone in New Zealand called Rubes who has like done some incredible content that I've been paying attention to, and I'm seeing this more and more where people like, for me it's the kind of streamer people that played games like PewDiePie and Jacksepticeye and that kind of corner of YouTube that's kind of evolving into game dev, and it's really fascinating to see. And I'm really curious about that, and I think it's perfectly in line with what this podcast is all about, and it's all about capturing the stories and trends that we're seeing in game dev and trying to just break down what's happening, why is it happening, what people like are inspired by. So I'm really excited to talk to you today. So the first question I have, just to kind of kick us off and get us rolling, which I think might be a common thread throughout this whole chat, but one thing that I think is really powerful is the power of memes. And I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but I think when it comes to like YouTube content creators, I think memes are almost the life force of a lot of the content. Right. And I'd love to know your thoughts and like how you view memes on like a day-to-day basis, and like how it inspires you with your content, if at all.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it, there's two types of game development videos. You've got, well, more the person themselves. You've either got like a game dev YouTuber or a YouTuber game dev, right? And it's what you prioritize more. And typically the people who lean more into YouTube are the ones that are seeing like the larger views, which is unfortunate. And I think the person we have to thank for that is probably Danny, because he's the person that took game development and bridged the gap to like gamers, and now that he's done that, it's almost impossible not to follow trend. And yeah.
Yes. So you're talking about Crab Game, right? That Danny did?
Well, I'm just saying in general, Danny's channel. Before Danny came around, a lot of game dev YouTube was it was all the same format. It was like lo-fi music, started off like filming some nature, and then it was like the video would start and they'd show off a bit of their game, and then they'd be making their food, whatever. It was like the same format for every single video, and it appealed to like a very, very small niche audience. But then when Danny came along, and there's other YouTubers who've come along too, but he's the one that really like blew up from it, and sort of said, oh, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try and sort of bridge the gap from trying to get game developers to watch these videos to trying to get people interested in video games in general to watch the videos. And it's ever since then, you kind of have to take one of those two paths, in that, are you going to prioritize the content and growing, or are you going to prioritize your game in general? And it's like a really fine balance.
That's interesting. So just as I kind of learn more about you and what path you're on, if you had to choose between being a YouTube content creator or being a game dev, which one would you choose?
Probably YouTube, just because it's literally my entire life. That's all I've wanted is just, I grew up watching YouTube. I always wanted, I've tried making gaming channels. I've tried so many different types of content, but yeah, there's something about just like not just making the game, but making the video as well. Like that entire process of having an empty Unity project to having a finished video, like documenting the whole thing, that entire process is what I enjoy. So it's kind of difficult to just say one or the other, but yeah, it's that entire creative process really.
Totally, and I think that's really important. That's an important distinction, because a lot of people that, I feel like the path that you've taken isn't a traditional game dev path, right? Like you're not wanting to work at a studio, and these are kind of questions that I have as well, is kind of what is your long-term ambition? Like, do you want to open up a studio one day, or are you just kind of riding the wave of this like indie dev, these videos that revolve around like game jam style content, and things like that? Like, do you have any bigger ambitions at this stage for like? I mean, I don't want to say bigger, because I don't want to discount the lifestyle of a YouTuber, but in terms of big studios that have teams for each department and that kind of thing.
Right. I mean, obviously, what I'm doing now, just like making games, making videos for those games, that is the most enjoyable thing in the world to me. There's nothing that I could be doing that I would rather be doing, but I'm also well aware that isn't something that's going to last forever, because I don't see myself in 50 years time on YouTube making game development videos. Like, there has to be a transition at some point. So obviously I didn't initially start making games just to make videos on them. So like, I do have a big interest in game development in general, and long term, yeah, it'd probably be nice to have a little indie studio or whatever. I'd never want to work in a big AAA studio. I feel like that's a very common consensus among indie developers. But yeah, no. For the time being, I just want to make videos and do what I'm doing, and potentially just transition into having a small studio or whatever.
Yeah. So you made the decision earlier this month to go full-time onto YouTube, and I'd love to know like what led to that decision, and what that kind of means for what your future looks like right now.
Right, so full-time is basically not going to university for a year, right? So I'm at that point where I can either, in September, I could go off to university and do a degree in computer science, which is what I would pick. But I don't enjoy that. That traditional schooling is just not for me. I feel like that's the same for a lot of people. And I feel if I don't take this time now to just make videos and pursue this, I'm going to regret it a lot. So I've essentially made the decision to defer for a year. So I've still got the place at university. So this isn't a risk. That's what I want to stress the most, is I'm not taking a risk. I'm not pinning my entire life on just becoming a YouTuber. This is a year out, and I'm going to get a lot of experience from it. And worst case scenario, I'm a year behind and I go into a degree a year later. Yeah,
what I find really interesting about the space, and there's something I want to talk about a little bit, is the community, and like the community of other like indie devs that you work with, that you create content with. And I feel like that's a real healthy space. And one thing that I think is worth noting is that it's international. Like you're based in the UK, your friend Polymars is from the US, Randy is from Australia. And it's what I love is that it's just kind of joining a Discord channel and then just making like content together. It's not like what I think of when I think of social media and like Vine and TikTok, where people kind of gravitate to LA and that's where the place is that you have to be. I feel like, and that's what I love about games as well, is that it's very international and global. Do you kind of feel that same way?
Yeah, it's kind of a blessing and a curse in that you can't just go and meet up with these people every single day. There's so many like like-minded people who are just so similar, but we're all spread out around around the world, and it is literally around the world. You know, Randy is as far away from me as he could possibly be. But yeah, no, I completely agree. I think, especially in game development, it's much easier to make collaboration content just because it works so well to do things remotely, and it would almost be harder to film something in real life. You know, it just flows really well.
There's so many threads I want to touch on. Talking about, because I know you're inspired by content creators like Tommy Innit, right? And just that whole streamer content creator, like, I don't know, Minecraft, like there's so many different like trends that have built people's careers. But I think Tommy Innit, for example, he does like vlogs as well. Is that like something that you are thinking about in the background of like second channels, different types of content around game dev, or like different industries? Like I'd love to know if you are kind of thinking that far ahead or not.
Yeah, so actually this is a little bit of an exclusive for you here, but in the summer, Polymars and Randy are actually both coming to the UK, and we're going to film a few things. I don't know if we're going to do any vlogs, maybe something for the second channel, I'm not sure. But we're essentially just gonna take the format we've already been using for those like $1,000 videos and do a real life one. And I'm gonna go on a bit of a tangent here, but the one video I'd love to make is sort of like we hire out like 2 adjacent offices, and we set up like GoPros, and we get like a guy on a camera, and we could like film one of those videos, but then we could also have like sabotages and going in the rooms and like switching off people's monitors and using air horns and things like that. I just love to make like real life content with people, and also there's nobody doing that. There's from what I know, there's no like IRL game dev collabs that have happened and made videos on. So
totally. I think another thread to touch on is like Mr. Beast, and I saw you made an itch.io game about Team C's, and like that's another topic of generating like content and gaining your building your community through something like Team C's. What do you think of Mr. Beast and kind of his content pipeline? Because he has made games before, but it's not at all the same vibe.
Yeah, the thing with, like, you mentioned Tommy Innit before and Mr. Beast, is it's not necessarily about their content per se. It's just from a like it's an admiration for how quickly they've grown and how they've done it. Mr. Beast, I'm obsessed with studying how Mr. Beast has grown so quickly. It's like his thumbnails especially for me. I love looking at Mr. Beast's thumbnails and seeing how he's done it, and how he always has these bright focal points in the thumbnails and stuff like that. Effectively, yeah, no, it's just studying those large YouTubers and trying to take what they've done in their niche and apply it in game development in one way or another. And it's the same with the $1,000 videos. That's very much inspired by Mr. Beast, and trying, because me and Polymars effectively sat in a call at some point last year. I think it was like July time, before the first video. And we were trying to come up with ideas from other niches that we could apply to our own, and we thought Mr. Beast was obviously the biggest, the most obvious, and so we made we wanted to make 2 separate videos, because traditionally with like game development collabs, you'll just show like the same game twice in 2 different videos, and it almost takes away from the other person. And we kind of had this idea that if we both made our own videos and like sort of linked them in that they would link to one another, and we titled them very similarly, that we kind of had a bigger chance of them doing well, because if one goes up, the other one goes up, and they just like bounce off one another. And yeah, no, Mr. Beast is a huge inspiration for stuff like that.
Yeah. One question I had written down was why, or are you on TikTok, and if not, why?
Yes, but my friends have had much more success on TikTok than I have, and the reason for that is, I think, it's very, very easy to grow as a game developer on TikTok. That's undoubtable. You know, I've uploaded videos just literally like taken my video, put it in a different aspect ratio, and it's got 50,000 views on TikTok. That you couldn't do that anywhere else. But where the big views come from is when game developers make dedicated TikToks, which is something that I haven't done yet. I haven't invested the time into learning about how that's done and what the best practices are. But you can see it with Miz's. He uploaded a TikTok, instantly got 1 million views, first TikTok. Polymars, his first TikTok got like 700k views in a few days. You know, it's super easy to grow on TikTok. It's an amazing platform, but I just haven't delved into it enough yet. So.
Yeah. Do you feel like if certain trends come up for like new platforms or new areas, because like that's something that I've observed with people like Mr. Beast, is he'd have like you'd clearly see when he starts attacking like a new platform, when the kind of like trend becomes popular. Is that something that you're kind of looking at like a higher view as your strategy on different platforms, or are you just focusing on YouTube for now?
The thing is, at the moment, is I'm holding off on a lot of stuff until I can do this full-time thing, right? Because I've obviously got exams coming up, and I've got so many different plans for when this like free year is ongoing. So, you know, I have actually got like a big list of things that I want to get done, and on there is TikTok, and I potentially want to, you know, try making a small little platform for uploading games and videos and stuff like that in the long term. But yeah, no, it's at the moment 100% focused on YouTube. But yeah, I think the next logical step would be to go to Twitch, and obviously when I have nothing to do all day, it's going to be easier to just jump on a stream for an hour a day and grow that organically. But short form content in general is definitely the way forward. I think it's, you know, every single social media has implemented some type of short form content, whether it be Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts or TikTok, and yeah, I think people's attention spans are just getting shorter and shorter, and it's just much easier to gain an audience through stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. You mentioned just before that you have ideas of wanting to build a platform for people to create like content and games within, and I see this similar to how like Minecraft has private servers, or you know, create games through Roblox or Fortnite Creative. Like what are your thoughts on those platforms for, because there's a whole range of people on YouTube that have careers out of making content within those platforms, not necessarily making the games themselves. So what are your thoughts on like creating a platform? Why do you want to do that?
Well, mainly just I've been thinking about this a lot recently. I actually put out a tweet yesterday saying that we need like a new version of Newgrounds, like a modern Newgrounds, and that is really something that I feel very passionate about. In that 10 years ago there was such like a tight knit, like closed community of just like creation almost on these websites, and it's just, ironically to what I've just said, it's all algorithmic now. Everyone is trying to appeal to an algorithm. There's no just creativity, and I feel this a lot when making a video, that I have to make creative sacrifices to make sure that a video will perform better. A prime example would be like intros to videos. One thing that I really hate doing is making a viewer seem like they've missed out. So for example, I've got a video coming up where I'm remastering one of my games, but I don't want to talk about the original game for too long at the beginning of the video, or they're going to feel like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like this, you know, this is made for somebody else. And effectively, what I'd like to do, I don't want to make something to rival YouTube or to rival TikTok. I just want to make a small little place where game developers, and not even just game developers, you know, musicians or artists can just, you know, be creative. They don't have to appeal to an algorithm, because there is no algorithm. It's just about having a presence somewhere, you know.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, and there's, I think, a lot of people that feel that same way about not being a slave to the algorithm or to the platforms. And I think at the end of the day it comes to like making money for a lot of these people, and to make money you have to go where the attention is, and that's the kind of chicken and egg situation, like struggle that a lot of people have. But yeah, definitely good like topics to be thinking about as you're kind of going down this path. So talking about Mushy, so that Mushy is the latest game that you made. And it's like I've kind of labeled it as like a CSGO like parody. I guess I'm trying to think of like a question that I can frame around it. But why did you make this game? Was it inspired by the idea of like a thumbnail and title, or was it more than that? And have you been thinking about it for a while? Because I see you're not continuing development on it soon. So what was your kind of thought process with that whole game?
All right, here's the thing with Mushy is that I actually never intended for it to be a Steam game, right? The idea was basically I've always just wanted to make a first-person shooter because I've never done that before, and so that's obviously just been in the back of my mind for ages. And then I had another idea around November time for a game that I wanted to make, but it would require me to know networking, and I didn't feel ready to tackle it. So I came back to the idea of the FPS and thought, right, well, that's a pretty simple thing that I could make to learn networking, so that's what I'll do. So I basically gave myself 2 months, December and January, to make this first-person shooter. Procrastinated for 6 weeks of that. So mid-January, I have... you're able to run around and switch weapons, and the player's animated and stuff. It's like a really terrible, like, unfinished game. And then I just grinded for 2 weeks, thought, this is absolutely terrible, no one is going to play this thing. And I know I just mentioned it wasn't supposed to be a Steam game. The reason for that transition to Steam was because we actually moved house in January. And to make a network game, you need to have an open port on your router, right? If you don't want to go through Steam. And I didn't have internet because we just moved, so I had to do something. I was using my phone for internet, and you can't open a port. So I effectively said, right, well, I'll learn this Steam stuff, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So it took me like a week to transition over to the Steam stuff, which prolonged actually working on the game even longer. And yeah, so anyway, it comes to the release day. And I actually put the game up like 12 hours before the video came out, because I'd never released the game, so I didn't want it to come up and say you have to wait 3 hours for this game to be live or anything. So I just released it, and the first Steam review I got was just like, what is this? Like, what is this game? This is terrible. And that kind of planted a seed in my head that anyone who hadn't seen the video wasn't going to enjoy this game, right? Because it's not a game designed for your average player. It's a game designed for a video. And I tend to do that a lot. Is I won't think about the player. I'll think about the video. And so anyway, the game comes out. People seem to actually enjoy playing it. So then I'm pressured into updating it and fixing all the bugs. So that was like a 2-week process. But yeah, ultimately the reason I'm not carrying on with it is because I never intended for anyone to really play it. It was just a prototype to learn networking. So it's insane. It did way better than it ever should have.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that you just made about making a game for a video and not just making a game. Like, I'm thinking like Jonas Tyroller's Will You Snail. I feel like he's marketed that as a game that can be independent, and he's trying to go through that kind of traditional route. Whereas I do think there's a growing market for people that see videos or see trends, and similar to the crab game and that game when Squid Game came out, it was a big meme. Everyone was talking about Squid Game, and then everyone started playing crab game. And even in the studio that I work at, like that game, there was sessions after work of people playing that just because it was funny, it was it was topical, and I think that's a huge part of the industry now.
100%.
Yeah,
it comes back to what I was saying earlier about being like a game dev YouTuber or YouTuber GameDev, and it's annoying because if you want to design a game for a video, you can't really do it in a typical way, because your typical game design is to make everything look really bad at first, right? And then in like the last sort of like fifth of development is when you're improving the visuals and making everything like finalized and polishing. Well, if you do that in a video, that means 80% of your video is just looking at dull stuff that no one cares about, right? And considering no one's actually playing the game, you could have designed like the world's best player controller, but in the video no one cares because they're not actually playing, they don't feel that. So it's very much about making the game look good throughout. And so you kind of have to design games in a weird way where you have this like vertical slice that you're just making bigger and bigger and bigger as the video goes on, rather than building it up in layers. And you mentioned Jonas. Jonas is actually kind of like special in his channel because, as you say, he's working on an actual game, but he's also making content in a way that appeals to the other side of it that I've spoken about. So it's like he's kind of like an all-round, like an all-star kind of thing. So it's,
yeah, no, it's interesting just seeing people just trying to make. I would be interested to know what Jonas would answer though if he said, if you asked him if he's a game dev YouTuber or a YouTuber game dev, because I feel like he's kind of riding that line right in the middle. So one thing I want to mention is I don't think you get enough credit for just the amount of work that you put into like learning network coding and the passion that you have for making games. Because for example, I'm on a path to becoming a games producer. Like I work in production. That's where my skill set is in communicating. And I have so much respect for programmers because I've tried to learn programming several times now and always just keep falling off the wagon and never committing to it. And I have so much respect for that. And it's not, I feel like being a YouTuber game dev isn't the same as being a YouTuber skit maker. It actually takes patience and skill to learn. Like I'm not saying it doesn't take skill to be a dancer or a lip sync artist or whatever, but it's for me it's amazing that you have kind of both of those threads. Like you actually did spend the time to learn network coding. That's not something that you can just learn in a 2-hour YouTube tutorial. Like it's something that takes a lot of time and kind of mental gymnastics to figure out. So I guess the next kind of topic I want to talk about is how you got into programming and why. Obviously YouTube's been around like throughout your whole life, but when did kind of game development come in, and when did you fully consider like getting into it?
I actually have a very good answer for this. When I was 15, I used to play a lot of video games. Like, throughout my entire life, I played a lot of video games, but it was getting to the point where I didn't really know what I wanted to do for a career. And I'd always had in the back of my head that I wanted to do like something in robotics, like making robots. But I'm there playing video games for 5 hours a night, just not really doing much in school and thinking like I'm gonna become like this robotic engineer. No, it doesn't work like that. I kind of just had like a big realization that you have to learn these things on your own. You can't just do school and like I can't play video games for 5 hours a night and expect to be anything special, if that makes sense. So it was actually Christmas Day 2018. I had like a realization. I was like, I need to do something. I need to learn something, and programming was an obvious step. Like I tried making games in the past when I was younger, and it just follow a tutorial for 40 minutes and then give up. And I was like, this time I'm gonna properly stick with it. I'm gonna actually do it. And I just decided I was gonna buy like a £10 course, like a uni course, so that I'd at least invested something into it that I couldn't get back, and it kind of was like an incentive to actually do the thing. So anyway, I made this game in like 2 days. It's called Knife Storm. It's actually on my itch still, and it's terrible. It's like a carbon clone of the tutorial thing. I didn't learn much from the tutorial. It was literally just copying. And it was actually Blackthorn Prod, the creator of the tutorial. So anyway, yeah, I finished that up, and then it was just from there, like, just working on bigger and bigger games. But yeah, there was definitely a breaking point for me where every time I tried to learn in the past, I never got there, and I just gave up. But then there was like a sort of like a click where it was like I started to really, really enjoy like learning about game development, and things just started to make more sense to me. And it was only about 2 weeks after I started learning that click happened, and like after that, it was just so much easier to just sit at my computer and actually work on something, rather than load up a game and play it for 5 hours. So it's like, yeah, that was how I got into programming, at least.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's awesome. I want to touch on this just because I think it's good for people to hear. You mentioned it earlier that you don't want to work in a AAA studio, and you want to kind of go down the indie path, or the YouTube content creator path. I'd love to know what your perspective is of AAA, and why you feel that way.
I don't have anything against AAA. Like, a lot of indie developers seem to only play indie games, which is like a very common thing that I see. Like, for me, I only really play AAA games. I don't play that many indie games. So like, I do love AAA games, and undoubtedly those studios can make far bigger games than an indie studio can. But for me, the thing I enjoy so much about making my own games and making my own videos and that entire thing is just being creative. And I have so many ideas, and there's so much stuff that I want to do, that if I was working under somebody on their creative vision, I just would not enjoy that at all. And so as much as I can, the priority for me is to just do something creative. I just love being creative, and bringing like my personal visions to life rather than somebody else's. And that's basically for me why I wouldn't want to work in an AAA studio, because I feel like I wouldn't have as much creative input. You know, I would still work for an indie studio that's somebody else's, because I imagine in smaller studios you get a lot more creative input and you can mold things a little bit more, you know, to your liking. But for me, I wouldn't want to sit there and just program something that I'm not interested in for, 8 hours a day. Just doesn't appeal to me at all.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a really good point. Just to from my perspective, just kind of talking to people on both sides of the coin, I think a lot of people don't they feel that joy from working on like a bigger project with like a team. They don't necessarily have that that creative side of their brain that makes them they appreciate having someone else have the vision. And I find that really interesting. One question that I often ask on this podcast from people that work in AAA and in indie is, do you believe that games are a form of art? And I'd love to know your answer to that question.
Yeah, 100%. More so than a lot of things, because you're doing so many different tasks at once. If you as a game developer can be an artist, a musician, what would you say, like an advertiser, a video editor, a sound designer. You can be all of these different things that in and of themselves are considered art forms, and you're bringing them all together. Like it's the ultimate art form,
Totally. Yeah. No, I love that. Well, it's interesting because the topic of games is like, and there's so many different types of experiences out there that it's hard to lump them all together. But a lot of what I see a lot of is people playing games for fun. Like the people that play games, they're playing it to have fun. And the idea of fun isn't something that you don't go watch like June at the theaters to have fun. Like you watch it to be entertained. And that's what I think is a very interesting distinction between games and other media is the idea of it being interactive. And what are your thoughts on games that aren't are made to be fun and like entertaining, and then games that aren't necessarily all about being fun? Like, have you had experiences playing games where it's not necessarily fun, it might be like a different emotion that you've felt a game has done a really good job of selling?
Yeah, 100%. There's like there's a game called The Beginner's Guide. I don't know if you've played it. No. It's basically, it's almost like just a walking simulator, and you effectively play through this story, and there's a narrator talking to you, and the narrator's basically telling you about his friend who used to make video games, and he used to make these video games for himself. He didn't want anyone else to play them, and he kind of let this friend in and said, look, you can play my games, and the friend took it upon himself to share them with other people, which the guy didn't want. And you're effectively just playing through this guy's games, and it's just this really nice storyline. There's no real gameplay to it. It's just walking through. But that is, I almost wouldn't categorize that and say Call of Duty. Like, they're so different, but they're both totally games, you know. Yeah. But no, 100%. There's almost movie-like games, and you know, games that are sheer just fun and, you know, killing zombies.
Yeah, no, totally. That's a really good point. I'm definitely going to check that out. Check that game out and link it below as well for anyone interested. One thing I wanted to touch on was monetization, and talking about like being a game dev YouTuber and YouTuber GameDev. I think that's a really good way to frame that question. In terms of monetization, do you see yourself ever creating a game that people have to pay for, or do you think, is that like a hard line for you to always make, you know, the games that you make videos about to be free to play by everyone?
Me personally, in YouTube, I feel like the least I can do is make my games free. And as well as that, because for example with the Mushy video, there's a sponsor on the video, I'm getting ad revenue from it. Like, it's almost greedy to make that a paid game at that point, because I've already, I don't know, but I value the people actually playing the game over the money I'd get from so many less people playing. And it's like the Mushy video, for example, people coming from Steam, just Steam's organic growth, I gained around 4,000 subscribers just from that. And that is, you know, like, if I'd have made the game paid, sure, maybe 100 people would have bought it. But the value of that is nowhere near the value you get from people actually playing the game, and also the growth you'll see from it as well. But yeah, there's, I say me personally because there's I've got a few projects I'm working on with other people where that is a goal of ours. So there's a developer called Tim Atlas, and he's an Australian guy, and we've kind of we've had this idea to work on a few like free games. We made one together. I never made a video on it, but we worked really well together. He's more of an artist, I'm more of a programmer, and so we've kind of joined forces to make a few games together, and we kind of just want to release a few free games and, you know, make a name for ourselves and prove to people that we can actually make good games, because that I feel like that's so important. You can't just come out of nowhere with a paid game and no marketing and just do well. So we kind of just want to make free games for videos, and then move away from that and try and make some paid games. But that is very much a secondary project for me. That's not like for me right now, YouTube is a primary focus. So that's something that's just going on in the background, basically.
Yeah, that's you mentioned marketing, and I think when every indie dev that I speak to, marketing is always the big question mark. Like, it's the area that a lot of them have the least experience in. They, you know, it takes money to like make money in a way, and building a community and all those things are really, like, indie devs really struggle with that when they're just focused on making their game. But I feel like being a YouTuber game dev almost solves that marketing side.
Yeah, because it definitely does.
Yeah. So but it sounds like you're aware of that, and you're kind of like thinking about the marketing side of game dev in a really kind of healthy way, which a lot of indie devs struggle with. And I guess just on that thread of marketing, do you have any advice for people that are making indie games that don't know how to market it? Like what would you tell them?
This is obviously my opinion. I think that a YouTube channel is the absolute best thing you could possibly do, because like I made a free game, I promoted it in a video, and it got 100,000 downloads. The game is not good. That's something I need to get across. The game is not a good game. There are people making far better games than me who have 20 times less following than me, and the fact that I had a following is what got me 100,000 downloads, not the fact that the game was good, you know. And the other forms of marketing, as you say, they require money and a lot more time and effort than just making a cool YouTube video on something. If you can and have the time to make a YouTube channel as an indie developer, that you absolutely should. That is the best thing that you can do.
I think that's really interesting. I mean, the fact that you just said that like the game isn't good, like
it's not.
that you don't think Mushy is good, and this is something that I think is very interesting. It's almost like the game can't be good in the kind of like YouTube game dev space. Like I'm thinking of Danny's announcement trailer for Crab Game. Like it's terrible, and it's made to be terrible, and it's got that parody satire tone. It feels like, you know, a PewDiePie video, and that's kind of the trend that I feel like exists, and that's what makes it kind of relatable. But it almost, like, the game can't. I feel like if Mushy was released as like a polished high-end game, it might not be as popular, and I kind of want to like touch on that. Like, why do you think the games have to be kind of jank by nature to be popular on YouTube?
I don't have an answer for that question, to be honest. I think it's just not taking yourself seriously is the absolute best thing that you can do. So that Crab Game trailer was actually a little like bit that I recorded when we were basically sat there in a call one day, testing Crab Game before it came out, and Danny needed a trailer for Steam, and I said to him, all right, give me a minute. I left, recorded on my laptop, just like this really awkward voice of just this is Crab Game, brought to you by just sounding like the worst possible thing I could think of for a trailer. I just recorded that, but it's so stupid, and people understand the humor. Like that's a universal joke, that it's just, you know, people appreciate that in game developers, just not taking stuff too seriously. I feel, especially for trailers. I'm a firm believer that stupid trailers are far better than serious trailers.
It's a hot take. No, but that is a really interesting thing. And it kind of, I don't know. I'm curious to know how this space will develop over the next few years, as, you know, people like yourself continue to gain in popularity, like where your attention goes in terms of polishing a game. Like if you do bring on a team of, like if you do have a sound designer and an artist and like a network programmer, so that you can like focus on the program, or you have like a programming team entirely, and you're just kind of focused on being the creative director. Like I wonder if that's where you're going to go, or if you're going to retain all creative control from beginning to end of that project, and if that is like sustainable.
I don't think I'll ever get to that level of having a whole team of programmers and a whole team of artists. I think if me and Tim, we want to have a studio eventually. We've discussed this a lot, but we wouldn't want it to be big. We would only want, you know, maybe 2 programmers, 2 artists, and 2 music. You know, we wouldn't want like a massive. Or it doesn't even have to be massive. We wouldn't want 20, 30 people in the team. It's just, you know, we'd rather have a small group of people who are so dedicated. You know, they wake up in the morning and have ideas for the project and just want to work on it, and they have a creative input on the project, you know. That is going to create a far what's the word, I don't know, a game that just has more care put into it than something that's just patched together by 50 people.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. I kind of asked this before, but I guess just framing it a bit differently is what is your like dream job? Do you feel like that is something that you see in the distance one day, or like what is your answer to that?
Just what I'm doing now, to be honest. I've said I can't think of anything I'd rather do. Just there's nothing more enjoyable to me than the whole creative process of going from, as I say, an empty Unity project to a finished video. It's everything about that, you know. And there's so much more that I feel I have to learn about that. You know, and yeah, besides that, obviously that's not going to last forever. It would be the small studio. That would be what I'd want to move on to.
Yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned Unity, and one thing, we're kind of wrapping up the chat a bit, but talking about game engines, what are your thoughts on Unreal versus Unity versus Godot, like any other like game engines? Do you have any thoughts or preferences? Where do you sit?
Yeah, I mean, I learned Unity and I never went away from it. That's the only reason I use it. I don't have a grudge against any of them. I've not really tried any of them, so I don't really know.
Is there
much.
Is there anything that you're waiting for in game engines that you think will really help with your content creation? Like, is there any feature or system that you're waiting for Unity to implement that you think will really help?
Not necessarily. I think one thing that could be good is like an actual like a version control system that is targeted towards people who have no idea what a version control system actually is. In that, like, you know, I've had problems with every single version control system I've ever used. I think if an engine gets that right, then I'm off. I'm moving there.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Well, if I was a programmer, I'd probably have a follow-up question to that, but I'm not, and I'll take your word for it. And yeah, that sounds interesting. In terms of like the Unity asset store, do you use it a lot? Do you like it? Do you think it's good?
Yeah, it's definitely good. I personally try to stray away from using other people's assets, especially in small projects, because if there's an asset that's carrying your game a lot, then it's kind of disingenuous to make this big YouTube video like, look what I made, and then it's just this hobbled together mess of people's assets. And also just, I don't want to get into the habit of relying on other people's stuff. I want to learn all the different aspects of game development myself. The only exceptions to that at the moment would be music and sound effects, because I just don't have the time to sink into learning those things. But I typically will, rather than touch the asset store, will pay one of my friends who makes music to do that for me, so it's at least original, even if it's not me that made it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting like take, because some people lean really heavily into the asset store, and you know, if they make a YouTube video, they'd credit them, but I get your point as to like, it doesn't look like your game at the end, because you know, the assets are what sell the video. And yeah, that is interesting. Would you ever sell your own assets? Like, has that been a thought process of like monetization one day, as putting your own assets on the asset store?
I mean, maybe, but I don't think there's anything that I can do. I'm not a specialized person, you know. I'm not amazing at art. I'm not amazing at programming. There's nothing individually that I would feel comfortable, or I feel is high quality enough to sell currently, and I don't necessarily feel that I'll ever get to that point. Yeah, probably not, to be honest. But yeah. Yeah,
no, that's all good. Cool. Well, I think that's kind of all the questions I had. I really appreciate your time and just kind of digging into this topic. For me, it's still really fascinating. I think there's a lot of like innovative things that are going to come out from YouTuber game devs, and there's going to be things like that will blow up, that will make traditional game developers look over at YouTube and go, wait a minute, like why aren't I in that space? And I think there's going to be a lot of that kind of happening, and a lot of people going from YouTuber game dev to traditional game dev, and the other way around. And I think it's a really interesting space, and I really appreciate you just giving the time to share your perspective. And I think a lot of people listening that might be in traditional game dev, like you're helping them understand what it's like to work, to be like a full-time YouTuber. So yeah, thank you so much. And for the podcast as well. I think this is a really exciting thread that I want to continue to explore. Just by having conversations with people like yourself, I think it's making the future of like what games are more understandable. And so yeah, no, thanks for your time. And anyone that's interested in following Jack, you can find his link to his YouTube channel below, Barji, and I'll put his Discord and Twitter and all that. And if you want to take part, it sounds like you include people in your videos a lot. So if you join the Discord, you can take part in competitions, play his latest games that he
100%.
Puts out. And yeah, any like final advice you have for people that maybe they're 15 years old, they're playing like 5 hours of Call of Duty every night, and they stumble on this video and think that they might want to pursue game development? Like, what advice would you give to that person listening right now?
All it takes is your time. There's you don't have to pay any money. You don't have to have the latest hardware. You just need to get on with it basically, and just push. I promise you, the longer that you do it, the easier it is to sit at a computer and work on something. And that's coming from somebody who had never done that before. Like it was straight from playing 5 hours a day to working on games 5 hours a day. Take it gradually. Maybe do half an hour a day at the start, but it's all just about consistency and pushing through. And yeah, you'll get there.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to maybe chatting to you in a year's time to see how much your page has 100%. Grown. But I'm excited to see what this next year brings for you and your career, your YouTube channel. So all the best, and thanks for your time.
No worries.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I hope you learned something about game development, the games industry as a whole, or the future of games. You can follow us on Twitter at Zero to Play, subscribe to us on YouTube or any other podcasting service. And I'll see you guys next week for the next episode.